Have you ever dreamed of exploring Germany, a country of fairy tale towns, forested mountains, and rivers lined with castles? Many travelers know Berlin or Munich, but few realize the country also hides quiet valleys, mirror-still lakes beneath the Alps, and medieval villages untouched by time. The best part is you don't have to plan it alone. Today, we'll take you through Germany's most extraordinary places, from fairy tale fortresses and alpine lakes to hidden forests and winding rivers. High above the Tauber River stands Rothenburg, a town encircled by stone walls and towers. Narrow streets wind between timbered houses painted in soft colors, their roofs steep and red beneath the sky. The old gates still mark the entrances, and the clock towers ring over courtyards that have changed little in centuries. The town sits on a plateau, its edge dropping sharply to the valley below. From the ramparts, the view opens over vineyards, meadows, and the curve of the river winding through the plain. Inside the walls, lanterns glow on cobblestones as night falls, lighting arches and alleyways that twist around small squares. In southwestern Germany, between valleys and ridges, stretches the Black Forest, a landscape of shadow, mist, and deep green light. Pines and firs climb the slopes in endless layers, their trunks rising straight and close together. Streams cut narrow channels through moss and stone, their sound the only movement beneath the canopy. Trails follow the ridgelines, opening suddenly to views of valleys filled with fog. In the early hours, light filters through the trees and narrow beams, scattered on wet leaves and spider threads that catch the sun for a moment before fading back into shadow. Lakes lie hidden between the hills, still and dark under walls of forest. The air smells of resin and rain, heavy after storms that roll across the plain. At the southern edge of Bavaria, near the Austrian border, lies Fussen, a town pressed between the mountains and the lakes. The streets climb gently toward the foothills, lined with pastel facades and steep roofs that catch the morning light. Behind them, the peaks rise suddenly, their slopes dark with pine and streaked with snow even in spring. The Lech River runs through the valley, clear and fast, its color shifting from turquoise to white as it moves over stone. Bridges cross the water toward meadows and forests that lead to the edge of the Alps. Paths climb from the town into hills where old fortresses and chapels overlook the plain. At the foot of the Zugspitze, Lake Eibsee lies surrounded by dense forest and steep stone slopes. The water is clear and still, shifting from deep blue to turquoise as light moves across it. Small islands scatter near the center, their reflections blurring in the calm surface like floating pieces of the shore. Paths circle the lake, winding through pine and spruce where the ground smells of moss and cold earth. In the morning, mist hangs above the water, drifting between the islands before the first light touches the peaks. The mountains rise sharply behind it, their ridges mirrored in the lake until wind breaks the surface. South of Karlsruhe, where the Rhine plain begins to rise toward the Black Forest, lies Ettlingen, a quiet town of bridges, arcades, and river light. The Elbe runs through its center, clear and narrow, flowing between stone embankments and small squares lined with cafes. Water murmurs under wooden footbridges, its sound following through the narrow streets. Timbered houses lean toward the river, their reflections flickering in the current. Arched gateways lead into courtyards where vines climb the walls and bells echo softly from nearby towers. At the edge of town, the forest begins, paths disappearing under beech and pine, the air cool and resin-scented. Along the border of Saxony, the Elbe sandstone mountains rise in towers and ridges of stone, carved by wind and water into impossible shapes. The cliffs stand above the river like walls of weathered rock, their edges worn smooth by centuries of rain. Pines cling to the ledges, their roots twisted through cracks in the stone. The Elbe winds through the valley below, a silver curve between dark forests and fields. From the trails above, the view opens over a labyrinth of pillars, arches, and bridges that link the cliffs together. In the early morning, mist gathers between the formations, drifting upward until the sunlight breaks through and the rock glows gold against the haze. At the foot of the Bavarian Alps lies Munich, a city built between rivers and plains that lead south toward the mountains. The Isar runs through its center, fast and green, splitting into channels that flow between bridges and shaded banks. Streets radiate outward from old squares, lined with arcades, markets, and tall church towers that rise above the rooftops. The city feels open yet dense. Tram lines hum past beer gardens and courtyards where chestnut trees spread shade over wooden tables. Narrow lanes lead to sudden plazas filled with stone facades and clock towers that echo through the afternoon. To the north, wide parks stretch for kilometers, their meadows crossed by cyclists and streams. Beyond the city, the land begins to rise. Hills and forests mark the transition to the Alps, visible on clear days as a jagged horizon of snow and rock. At the edge of the Berchtesgaden Alps lies Lake Königssee, a narrow stretch of water hemmed in by cliffs that fall straight from the peaks. The lake runs long and deep, its surface dark green and mirror still, broken only by the wake of passing boats. Sound travels slowly here. The echo of a horn bounces from rock to rock before fading into silence. Forests cling to the lower slopes, giving way to bare stone higher up. Waterfalls drop from unseen heights, thin white lines against the cliffs. In the morning, mist drifts over the lake, wrapping the mountains in a gray veil that lifts as the sun cuts through the valley. At the far end stands St. Bartholomew's, its red domes bright against the rock. Behind it, glaciers and ridges rise into the clouds, their reflections trembling on the water as the wind moves through the alpine air. On the northern shore of Lake Bodensee lies Meersburg, a town built in layers above the water. The lower streets follow the edge of the lake, where boats rock against stone quays, and the air smells of wine and rain. Stairs climb steeply from the harbor through arches and terraces lined with vines and roses that trail over walls of pale plaster. Above the roofs, the castle stands on a cliff of sandstone, its windows facing the lake and the distant Alps. From its terraces, the view opens over the blue expanse of Bodensee, where ferries and sailboats drift between the shores of 3 countries. Between rolling hills and steep cliffs, the Rhine carves a deep path through western Germany. The river moves broad and steady, its surface broken by barges in the wake of passing ships. Vineyards climb the slopes in sharp lines, their terraces tracing the contours of the valley. Castles crown the ridges above, their towers rising from the mist that gathers each morning along the water. Villages cluster at the base of the hills, their roofs red and slate gray against the green. Church spires rise above the banks, and trains follow the curve of the river, vanishing into tunnels cut through the rock. The air carries the smell of wet stone and vines warmed by the sun. Dresden lies along the Elbe River, surrounded by the gentle hills of Saxony. The city unfolds on both banks, its bridges joining Baroque facades, domes, and spires that rise above the water. From the river, the skyline looks almost painted, stone glowing in the afternoon light, towers mirrored in the slow current below. The old city carries the weight of fire and reconstruction. Buildings once lost to war have been rebuilt stone by stone, their courtyards filled again with music and echo. Narrow streets open into wide plazas where the sound of footsteps blends with the movement of trams and church bells. Across the river, the newer districts climb the hills, their gardens and villas looking back toward the city center. In summer, the meadows along the Elbe fill with people and the smell of grass after rain. Along the Rhine, between gentle hills and wide water, lies Oestrich-Winkel, a line of vineyards, towers, and quiet villages stretching across the valley. The river moves slowly here, broad and silver, its surface broken by the wakes of barges heading north. Rows of vines climb the slopes above the town, their lines following the shape of the land until they disappear into the forest. Stone houses stand close to the river, their facades pale from sun and rain. Church spires rise among them, their bells echoing across the water. In the evenings, the air smells of grapes and earth, and light settles over the valley in shades of gold. High above the foothills of the Bavarian Alps, Neuschwanstein rises from a ridge of rock and forest. Its towers and turrets climb into the mist, pale stone against the dark green slopes below. From the valley, the castle seems to float above the trees, its reflection appearing in the lakes and streams that gather at its base. The approach winds upward through dense forest, where shafts of light cut between the branches. As the path climbs higher, the view opens, meadows, rivers, and distant peaks, framed between the towers. Inside the walls, arches and stairways spiral toward halls painted with scenes of myth and mountain legend. Clouds often drift through the windows, and the air carries the scent of rain and stone. Beyond the ramparts, the Alps rise in jagged lines toward the horizon, their ridges fading into blue haze as the valley stretches away below. Bremen stands on the banks of the Weser, a river city shaped by centuries of trade and quiet water. The current moves slowly here, wide and brown, reflecting cranes, bridges, and church towers that rise from the flat northern plain. Streets follow the curve of the river, narrowing into alleys paved with worn stone and lined with gabled facades. At the heart of the city stands the market square, the cathedral's twin towers beside the town hall's carved stone, darkened by time and rain. Bronze statues guard the corners, their surfaces polished by years of touch. From there, narrow lanes lead to courtyards filled with light, small cafes, and the sound of distant bells. In the lake country of northern Germany lies Müritz National Park, a landscape of water and forest stretching to the horizon. Dozens of lakes connect through channels and wetlands, their surfaces broken only by reeds, birds, and drifting clouds. The air carries the scent of pine and damp earth, heavy after rain. Paths wind through beech and birch forests, where shafts of light fall through the canopy and scatter on the forest floor. Wooden walkways cross over bogs, their planks creaking softly above dark, still water. In the early morning, mist gathers above the lakes, moving slowly between the trees before dissolving into sunlight. Nuremberg lies in northern Bavaria, built along the Pegnitz River, where bridges and stone towers divide the old town into islands of streets and squares. From the center, the river splits under arches and courtyards before flowing east through narrow channels. Half-timbered houses lean over the water, their reflections cut by the ripples of passing ducks. Above the city rises the fortress, thick walls, towers, and ramparts that climb the sandstone ridge. From there, the view opens over red rooftops, church spires, and the slow movement of trams below. The walls encircle the old city, their gates leading to markets where stalls fill the squares with color and sound. Inside the walls, narrow lanes twist between arches and bridges. Stone bridges cross canals lined with cafes, their terraces hanging above the water. At the center of Germany, the Harz rises in ridges of forest and rock. The mountains stretch across valleys filled with mist, their slopes thick with spruce and beech. Streams cut narrow channels through the stone, turning to waterfalls where the ground drops sharply between ridges. Trails wind upward through dense woods, where the light shifts between shadow and fog. In the morning, clouds hang low over the peaks, drifting through trees that stand back against the pale sky. The air smells of resin, moss, and wet earth, and the sound of water follows everywhere, falling, echoing, disappearing into the forest. From the summit of the Brocken, the highest peak, the view opens in all directions, rolling hills, deep valleys, and wind sweeping across the plateau. In the northeast of Germany lies Berlin, a city spread across a flat plain of rivers and lakes. The Spree cuts through its center, dividing islands, bridges, and long tree-lined boulevards. Streets stretch outward in every direction, crossing canals and rail lines that weave the city together. Berlin carries layers of history in its streets. Fragments of walls and cobblestones mark old borders, while restored facades stand beside blocks of glass and steel. The skyline mixes towers, domes, and cranes, construction never fully stopping. Tram lines hum past courtyards that open to gardens, workshops, and quiet canals. The city's rhythm shifts constantly. Crowds fill plazas and markets during the day, while the banks of the Spree turn quiet at night, lit by reflections from bridges and museums. Forests and lakes surround the edges, softening the horizon where the city gives way to open country. In the far south of Germany, the Bavarian Alps rise in sharp ridges and deep valleys. Peaks of limestone and snow catch the first light of morning, glowing pale gold before the clouds drift across their slopes. Between them lie meadows, rivers, and lakes, so clear they mirror the mountains above. Villages sit in the folds of the land, their rooftops pressed against forests of pine and spruce. Bells echo through the valleys, fading into the sound of streams running cold from melting snow. Roads wind upward through forests that open suddenly onto plateaus where cattle graze beneath walls of rock. Higher still, the landscape turns silent. Trails cross over stone ridges where only wind and water move. Above the rooftops of the Harz foothills stands Wernigerode Castle, its towers rising from a ridge of forest and slate. The walls climb with the slope, tier upon tier, until the turrets meet the clouds that drift low over the valley. From below, the castle looks half hidden by trees, its roofs sharp against the changing sky. A winding road leads upward through beech and pine, opening at each turn to glimpses of towers and carved balconies. In the morning, mist gathers along the hill, wrapping the battlements in pale light. The stone holds the color of the forest, dark gray, green, and gold, where moss clings to the walls. Leipzig lies where rivers and canals cross the plains of Saxony. Water moves quietly through the city, flowing between trees, parks, and narrow bridges that link the old quarters together. From above, the pattern of waterways and streets forms a network that spreads outward from the center, like roots through soil. The heart of Leipzig is built from stone and music. Arches and courtyards echo with sound from nearby halls and churches, where choirs have sung for centuries. The streets are lined with tall facades and arcades that lead into covered passages, filled with shops and light filtering from glass roofs above. Beyond the far end of Königssee lies Obersee, a smaller lake enclosed by cliffs that rise almost straight from the water. The surface is clear and still, reflecting every line of the rock above. When the air is calm, the reflection is perfect. Sky, stone, and forest doubled in the glass of the lake until wind breaks the surface. A narrow path follows the shoreline, crossing streams and meadows that open suddenly between the walls of rock. Wooden barns stand alone near the water, their roofs silvered by rain and time. Waterfalls descend in thin threads from the mountains above, scattering mist that drifts across the valley. In northern Germany, where the Elbe River widens toward the North Sea, lies Hamburg, a city shaped entirely by water. Canals thread through its center, bridges outnumbering those of any other city in Europe. Warehouses, docks, and cranes stretch along the riverbanks, their outlines mirrored in the tide. The port dominates the horizon. Ships move slowly between container terminals and shipyards, their lights scattered across the water at night. Ferries cross between piers, and the air smells faintly of salt and metal. Beyond the harbor, modern glass towers rise beside brick facades from the 19th century, their red walls darkened by rain and time. Inland, narrow canals divide districts of markets, warehouses, and quiet courtyards. The city is built on reclaimed marshland, its streets layered over centuries of trade and rebuilding. During storms, gates close along the Elbe to hold back the sea, reminders that Hamburg lives on the edge of both land and water. At the eastern shore of Lake Bodense lies Lindau, a town set on an island linked to the mainland by bridge and rail. The harbor opens wide to the south, framed by a lighthouse and the stone lion that watches over the water. Boats drift between the piers, their masts reflected in the still surface of the lake beneath the mountains. Narrow streets wind through the island, shaded by arcades and towers that rise above red roofs. The air carries the scent of water and fruit from the orchards that line the lakeshore. Along the promenade, cafes spill into the sunlight, and the sound of footsteps mingles with the clink of sails against masts. South of Munich, the mountains open into a wide basin of water and forest. Lake Tegernsee, clear and deep beneath the slopes of the Alps. The surface shifts between blue and green, carrying the reflection of clouds in the ridges above. Villages gather along the shore, their rooftops mirrored in the calm water that reaches into coves lined with reeds and birch. Trails circle the lake, passing wooden docks, boathouses, and meadows where the wind moves through grass. In the early morning, the water lies still, mist drifting low between the hills. Later, sunlight turns the peaks bright against the sky, and sails appear as white shapes, moving slowly across the distance. Hanover lies on the Leine River, spread across a flat plain in northern Germany. The city feels open and measured, its streets wide and lined with trees that follow canals and tram lines through the center. Water gathers in quiet basins and lakes, reflecting towers and willows that lean toward the surface. The Moschsee stretches south of the city, a long artificial lake built between parks and gardens. Rowers move across its calm surface, while paths circle the shore beneath rows of poplar and lime. Beyond it, the old royal gardens extend in straight lines and symmetry. Hedges, fountains, and statues set among gravel walks and geometric lawns. High above the Neckar River, Heidelberg Castle rises from the slope of the Königssee, its red sandstone walls glowing in the afternoon light. The towers stand broken in places, open to the sky, their edges softened by ivy and thyme. From below, the ruins seem part of the hillside itself, a blend of stone, forest, and air. The old town stretches beneath the castle, its rooftops pressed close along the river. Narrow lanes climb upward toward the gates, paved with smooth stone and lined with houses that lean toward the slope. Inside the walls, courtyards open to terraces overlooking the valley, where arches and stairways frame the view of bridges and church towers below. In western Germany, near the Belgian border, lies Eifel National Park, a landscape of forested hills, volcanic lakes, and silence. The terrain folds into valleys and ridges, its slopes covered in beech and oak that shift from green to gold through the seasons. Small craters fill with dark water, their surfaces still and cold, reflecting clouds and branches above. Paths follow the edges of the lakes and disappear into deep forest. Fallen leaves soften the ground, and the air smells of damp soil and wood smoke drifting from distant villages. Streams run clear through narrow gorges, cutting through layers of volcanic stone before vanishing underground. In the morning, fog rises from the hollows and settles over the trees, moving slowly with the wind. Between the trunks, light breaks in thin bands, flickering on the water like distant fire. On the banks of the Rhine lies Cologne, a city built on layers of history and river light. The water defines its rhythm, barges moving beneath bridges, currents carrying the scent of the north. Streets follow the river's curve, spreading into a maze of narrow alleys and open squares that trace the shape of the old city walls. The cathedral dominates everything. Two spires rise far above the rooftops, their stone darkened by centuries of wind and smoke. Around it, modern glass and concrete mix with medieval foundations, a patchwork rebuilt after war and time. Beneath the streets run Roman ruins, cellars, and old passages that mirror the city above. On the banks of the Rhine lies Dusseldorf, a city of light, movement, and glass. The river curves wide and calm, its surface catching reflections of bridges, cranes, and towers that rise along the shore. Paths follow the embankment for miles, where cyclists and walkers move with the steady rhythm of the water. The city spreads across both banks, joined by long bridges that glow after dusk. Old quarters of narrow streets and stone facades stand beside districts of steel and mirrored glass. The contrast is constant. Church spires rising near skyscrapers, cobblestones leading into plazas of concrete and light. Along the waterfront, cafes and markets stay open late, the sound of music carrying over the river. Where Germany meets Switzerland and Austria lies Lake Bodensee, a wide expanse of water stretching toward the foothills of the Alps. The surface shifts with the weather. Silver in morning light, deep blue beneath clouds, gold at dusk. Ferries move between harbors, their wakes cutting long white lines through the calm. Villages and vineyards follow the shoreline, their rooftops mirrored in the still water. The air carries the scent of fruit and rain from the orchards that grow near the lake. Along the harbors, boats rock against wooden piers, and gulls circle low over the shallows. On clear days, the mountains appear beyond the southern shore, pale and distant above the haze. Paths and cycle tracks wind through fields and along the water's edge, passing reeds, towers, and small chapels that stand alone beside the shore. At the center of Germany, along the main river, rises Frankfurt, a city built on contrasts of height and history. Glass towers dominate the skyline, their reflections cutting into the river below. Between them lie narrow lanes of old stone churches and timbered houses that survived fire and reconstruction. The Main runs through the heart of the city, crossed by arched bridges that link the financial district to quiet neighborhoods beyond. Along the riverbanks, paths stretch for kilometers, filled with cyclists, markets, and people watching the water move east toward the Rhine. The air carries the hum of trains, trams, and planes, the sounds of a city built around movement. Stuttgart lies in a basin surrounded by wooded hills and vineyards. From above, the city looks enclosed, streets and rail lines curving through the valley, rooftops rising toward the ridges that close the horizon. Roads climb the slopes in tight switchbacks, passing terraces of vines and clusters of houses that look down over the city below. The air often feels heavy in summer, trapped between the hills. Trams and cars move through tunnels and over bridges that cross the bowl-shaped landscape. Parks and gardens thread through the center, remnants of old royal grounds turned into green corridors that follow the streams. South of Cologne, where the Rhine bends toward the hills, lies Bonn, a city built between river and slope. The water moves broad and slow here, carrying reflections of bridges, ferries, and vineyards climbing the valley walls. Along the embankment, long rows of poplars follow the curve of the river, their leaves shifting in the wind that comes down from the Siebengebirge. The city spreads quietly behind them. Streets lined with linden trees lead to courtyards, gardens, and the old university buildings with yellow facades that fade in the afternoon light. Church towers rise above the roofs, and trams slide through narrow streets toward the station. On a forested hill above the Rhine Valley stands Braunfels Castle, its towers and spires rising from a ridge of dark stone. The walls appear suddenly through the trees, their slate roofs and pointed turrets giving the hill the shape of a storybook fortress. Below, the village winds upward in narrow streets, paved with uneven stone, each turn revealing new angles of the castle above. Inside the gates, courtyards open between steep roofs and arched passages. Stone stairways climb toward towers that look over the forest and river valleys beyond. In the early morning, mist gathers around the base of the walls, drifting between the trees before lifting into the hills. Between forested hills and open fields lies Chiemsee, the largest lake in Bavaria, spread like a mirror beneath the northern edge of the Alps. The water lies still in the morning, thin mist drifting above its surface before the first light touches the peaks. Ferries move slowly between the islands, their reflections breaking the calm in soft ripples. Herreninsel rises from the center of the lake, crowned by a palace built to echo Versailles. Paths wind through beech forest and meadows where the sound of water mixes with the rustle of leaves. Nearby, Fraueninsel feels smaller and quiet, its narrow lanes lined with cottages, gardens, and the bells of an old monastery. Along the shores, reeds and willows edge the water, their branches trailing in the shallows. At the edge of the Baltic Sea lies Kiel, a city built around its long, deep fjord. The water cuts inland for kilometers, lined with shipyards, cranes, and docks that fill the air with the hum of engines and metal. Ferries and sailboats move through the channel, their wakes spreading in slow ripples toward the shore. The city stretches along both sides of the water, its streets turning toward the harbor at every angle. Along the quays, warehouses stand beside glass towers, and the masts of tall ships rise above the roofs. The air smells of salt, oil, and pine from the forests that surround the bay. Beyond the port, the coast opens to wide beaches and quiet coves. The sound of gulls and wind replaces the noise of ships, and the sea turns from gray to green beneath the shifting light. South of the main river, the Odenwald stretches across a maze of hills, forests, and stone villages. The landscape folds gently, rising from fields into ridges covered in beech and oak. Streams run through narrow valleys, their water clear and fast, cutting between moss-covered rocks before joining the Neckar. Paths wind through the woods, crossing meadows bright with wildflowers in spring. Old farmhouses sit along the slopes, their timber darkened by weather and time. On higher ground, towers and castle ruins rise above the trees, fragments of stone watching over the forest below. In the evening, mist gathers in the hollows, drifting through branches and settling over the grass. The air smells of earth and pine, and the sound of birds fades into the low hum of insects. In the flatlands of Westphalia lies Münster, a city of canals, arcades, and quiet movement. The streets curve around the old center, lined with gabled facades rebuilt stone by stone after war. Under the arcades, light filters through arches and catches on wet cobblestones as trams and bicycles pass by. The city moves at a steady rhythm. Cyclists fill the promenades that circle the old walls, riding between parks, lakes, and narrow bridges that cross the waterways. The Ossee spreads at the edge of the center, its calm surface reflecting trees and church towers under changing skies. From the cathedral square, spires rise above rooftops, patched in red and gray. Bells echo through narrow streets, fading into the hum of wheels on stone. In the heart of the Ruhr Valley lies Essen, a city shaped by coal, steel, and the quiet that followed their decline. Rail lines and canals still trace the routes once used to feed the furnaces, but the air now carries the sound of wind through trees instead of machinery. The land is flat and green, scattered with the outlines of factories turned into museums and gardens. The Zollverein complex rises above it all, towers, shafts, and conveyors preserved in red steel, their geometry sharp against the sky. Around it stretch lawns, galleries, and paths that weave through the old industrial grounds. Forests and parks fill the gaps between districts, reclaiming ground that once burned with heat and smoke. Karlsruhe spreads across the upper Rhine plain, its streets radiating outward from the palace like the spokes of a wheel. From above, the city looks deliberate and ordered, long avenues cutting through parks and squares before fading into the flat horizon. At the center stands the palace, its yellow facade mirrored in lawns and fountains that extend toward the forest. The air here feels open. Trams glide through the wide boulevards, their tracks curving gently through rows of trees. Gardens and lawns fill the spaces between buildings, and the geometry of the plan remains visible from almost any point. Far off the North Sea coast lies Amrum, an island of sand, wind, and endless light. Dunes rise and fall like waves frozen in motion, their slopes covered in grass that bends with the wind from the sea. The horizon feels close and infinite at once, sky, sand, and water blending into one shifting surface. Along the western shore, the tide reveals wide mudflats where flocks of seabirds gather in the shallow pools. Oyster catchers, terns, and sandpipers move in sudden bursts across the waterline. Beyond them, seals rest on distant sandbanks, their shapes scattered like stones in the tide. Germany is a land of rivers, forests, and stone, where castles rise above valleys, villages rest beside still lakes, and cities blend centuries of history with glass and light. From the Rhine to the Alps, every landscape tells a different story. If this journey inspired you, hit subscribe. There are countless more places to discover across the world, right here on the channel.